Now we're going to hear from Molly Stark, who is a physical therapist and clinical evaluator at the Paul and Sheila Wellstone Muscular Dystrophy Center at the University of Minnesota. She received her Bachelor's of Science and Doctorate of Physical Therapy degrees from the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse. She's been a physical therapist for 7 years, and she has 5 years of experience working with children and adults with neuromuscular disorders. She's also a clinical evaluator and has worked on 15 different clinical trials and research studies for individuals with neuromuscular diseases. So Molly, I will turn it over to you. Thank you for being here.
All right, so we're going to talk about exercise with neuromuscular disease. And I just need to start with saying all neuromuscular diseases are so different. So it's kind of hard to talk about exercise in general for neuromuscular disease because each different type of disease requires different things, or different things are contraindicated. So before you start any type of exercise program, I would strongly encourage you to talk to your doctor or physical therapist before you start an exercise program. Oh, sorry, and then it went back. See if I can try this. I don't know how to get it back. So it's important to start slowly and gradually increase the intensity of the exercise. I'm sorry, now I can't get it back to how it was. Oh goodness. Well, you guys, I'm sorry. You're just gonna see some of my notes. I don't know how I just changed it. Okay. So the important thing is to really focus on you, because you are an individual, just like your neuromuscular disease is different than somebody else's. So it's really important to tailor the exercise towards you and what you would like to get out of what you're putting into it. After all, the reason you're exercising is for you. It's not for anybody else. So it's important to focus on what you need as an individual. So the primary goals of exercise with neuromuscular disease is to really optimize your function, optimize your ability to do different things throughout the day, minimize impairments, meaning minimize your loss of balance or maybe weakness, and try to improve upon those. Improve your tolerance to different positions, like your sitting tolerance or your standing tolerance. Reduce the secondary effects of the disease. So potentially reducing contractures or reducing pain that may be a result of the way you sit throughout the day or the way you do different things. And then to avoid fatigue and overuse syndromes. And then there's lots of different benefits of exercise. So like I mentioned, depending on the type of neuromuscular disease that you have, you may be able to increase, maintain, or at least minimize the progressive loss of muscle strength. Typically, earlier in the disease process, it's easier to change this rather than later. But some types of neuromuscular disease, you can't change the progression at all. So exercise is for other reasons in that case. You may be able to improve your level of functional capacity, improve your body's regulatory and response system, so to influence the nervous system or your endocrine system, and then to decrease the effects of the disease process. So when we talk about exercise is just like any other prescription you can get from a doctor. There's lots of different factors that go into it, and so we need to think about 4 different things when you think about how you're going to exercise. So the frequency, is this something that you're going to do once a day? Is it once a week, or somewhere in between? And then the intensity of it, is this something that can be light, like stretching, or is this something that's more moderate intensity where it's a little bit, you're going to work with breathing and feel fatigued afterwards? And then how much time to put into it. Is this something you can do for a couple minutes each day, or is it something that you spend 30 to 45 minutes doing? And then the type of exercise. So this is mainly what we're going to focus on today are the different types of exercise and what you can choose that works really well for you. And it may be that several different types of exercise work well for you. So we'll go through each of those. So just some general recommendations before you start an exercise program is that it's important to balance activity with rest. So, doing activity, doing exercise is good for you, but those rest breaks are equally as important, whether it's resting in the middle of an exercise program or at the end of it, or taking a day off in between whatever activities you do. And then it's important to avoid generalized fatigue and muscle soreness. So, if you do an exercise and the next day you're really tired or your muscles are sore, that means you probably did too much. And one time doesn't hurt anything, but over time, you want to make sure that you're avoiding that intensive an exercise that it caused fatigue or muscle soreness. And then stay hydrated. Your muscles love water, they need water to function. So it's important to be really hydrated when you do exercise so that your muscles can work at their optimum level. Um, and then this kind of ties in what Caitlin was talking about too, is remember that movement and participation is important for physical and emotional health. So we're not just talking about what the exercise is going to do for your muscles, but it's what it's going to do for you overall. And then also similar to what Caitlin was talking about, it's really important to choose age and functionally appropriate activities. So exercise for a 5-year-old will look very different than somebody who's middle aged, and it'll look very different for somebody who is ambulatory versus non-ambulatory. So I'm going to talk about a lot of different things, and some things may apply to you and some things may not. So just choose the parts that really apply to you. So we're going to start off with stretching. Stretching is something that if you've seen me or seen another physical therapist, I'm sure they've talked about stretching. And there's a lot of different benefits of stretching. Most importantly is that it helps you move. So we know that it may not change the progression of your loss of motion or contractures, but it does increase the blood flow to the muscles. It can decrease muscle stiffness, decrease pain, and potentially early on in the disease can affect the range of motion and contractures. So there's lots of different ways to stretch. You could even do an orthotic. They would keep you in the right position. Do splinting, like a hand splint that you might use at night. Use a standing frame that might help stretch your hamstrings. Different positioning techniques to keep you in the right position. I have some people that like to lift the legs up on their power chair so they can stretch behind their knees while they're just sitting in place throughout the day. And then there's manual stretching where you have a caregiver help you with the stretch, and self-stretching where you stretch on your own. And there's different options as far as how long you stretch. So in general, to improve length, you must maintain the stretch for at least 60 minutes in a 24-hour period. Ideally, it's longer than that, which is why we talk a lot about splints at night. And then to maintain length, it's important to do at least some type of stretch each day, probably a manual stretch that has a caregiver help you, or something that you do on your own. So for frequency, at a minimum, I'd recommend doing it 3 to 5 times a week, but optimally up to 5 to 7 times per week. And then standing, I kind of briefly talked about this, but standing has a lot of great benefits. Beyond just stretching, it helps promote bone health and increase your bone mineral density, enables your upright participation, helps improve your trunk posture, and promotes your gastrointestinal motility. So for this, I'd recommend standing up to 60 minutes during a session, or you can split it up into a few sessions throughout the day. And to stand at a minimum of 3 to 5 times per week, but ideally 5 to 7 times per week. And then balance. Balance is a great activity because you have a few different balance systems. You have your joints that kind of give you feedback to know if you're upright or if you're tipping. And then you have your eyes that can kind of tell where the horizon is, and if you're like tilted off to one side. And then your inner ears tell you that too. And the beauty of these systems is they all work together and they can be retrained. So if your joints and muscles aren't quite sending the right feedback because your nerves are not sending the messages correctly, then your eyes and ears can take over and become even better than they were before, with balance training. So it's really important, especially if you're ambulatory, to prevent falls. But you can also use it if you are not ambulatory to improve your sitting balance. You can reach further out of your base of support to grab different items, or feel really steady in your chair or whatever you're sitting on. So there's a few different ways to improve your balance. Um, Doing a home program that's you help come up with your physical therapist is probably one of the best ways, because then it can be catered towards you. And you can do this statically, where you're practicing a still balance, like standing on one foot or sitting and closing your eyes without arm support. Or you can do it dynamically, where you're walking backwards or you're reaching way outside of your base of support to grab something off of a shelf. And then we can get more creative too and do martial arts, like Tai Chi is really good for balance. Doing different types of yoga or video game based activities like the Wii or PlayStation, the Connect, have lots of great fitness activities. For this, it's recommended to do it 3 to 4 times a week, but optimally 5 to 7 times per week. And then we'll talk about strengthening. So, strengthening is one that's a little bit tricky to talk about across all the different types of neuromuscular disease, because each different type has different requirements and different things that are contraindicated for what you can do. But as a general rule, if you are stronger, so these numbers I have up here, greater than 3 out of 5 medial muscle testing, kind of our PT jargon, but really what it means to say is if you have above anti-gravity strength, so if you can lift your hand up to your shoulder, or if you can lift it up in the air, that means you're overcoming gravity with that limb. And that means it's strong enough that it really doesn't have any restrictions. You can do concentric or eccentric, which means either, it's fancy ways to say your muscle can be either lengthening or shortening. So if it's shortening, bring it down so you can see me a little better. So shortening would be like doing a bicep curl. Your bicep is shortening as you bring it up. And then eccentric is lengthening it. So it gets longer and longer as it lets that weight back down. So basically means you can lift weights or do different things in both directions without risk of harming your muscle. And then if you have that same strength, you can do things with and without resistance, maybe weights or TheraBands, or different other items that add resistance. And then you can exercise every muscle group in your body, whether it's proximal, like around your trunk, or distal, like the ends of your legs and arms. And then if your strength is less than anti-gravity, so it's hard for you to lift up, maybe you can get your hand partway up towards your shoulder. Basically, you can go through part of the range of motion of what your joint can do against gravity. But if gravity is not involved, you can do a lot more. So for this, you want to avoid strengthening your muscle as it's getting longer, and avoid resistive exercise. So especially for this, if you fall into that category, I'd really talk to your physical therapist about what strengthening exercises are really good for you and what might not be as good for you and your muscles. So for this, it's recommended to do up to 30 minutes per session at a minimum of 2 to 3 times per week, but optimally 3 to 5 times per week. All right, and then let's talk about aerobic exercise. So there's lots of different ways to do aerobic exercise. Aerobic exercise is what's really good for your heart and your lungs. We can't forget about them. We think about muscles a lot when we talk about exercise, but not as much your heart and lungs, and they're equally as important to train. So one of the best ways to do this is swimming or doing different aquatic therapy exercises in the water. Some of the video game based activities are good for this too. Doing upper and lower extremity ergometry, or doing like a bike that maybe helps you pedal, or maybe you pedal it completely on your own. You can do it with your hands where they're pedaling right in front of you, or with your legs where they're strapped into the pedals. Yoga may also offer some aerobic exercise depending on how you do it. And wheelchair sports offer great aerobic exercise because you're out, you're moving with a team. Whether you're driving a power chair or using a manual chair, they both get your heart and lungs working much more than at rest. So for these, it's recommended to do at least 30 minutes per session, at a minimum 2 to 3 times per week, and then optimally up to 3 to 5 times per week. So aquatic therapy, I just wanted to talk about this a little bit more in depthly because it's one of the best activities you can do for your body, whether you're non-ambulatory or ambulatory. It offers some resistance training to strengthen your muscles, as well as endurance training for your heart and lung capacity. The warmth of the water, especially if it's a warm water pool, can help you stretch your tight muscles after an exercise program. And it takes the impact off of the pressures of your bones and your joints and your muscles. So previously, like if you have less than anti-gravity strength, where it's hard for you to move through your full motion, water takes that away and it removes gravity for the most part, so you can move freely through the water. So it's important to include a warm-up, different active range of motion exercises, aerobic, stretching, strengthening, and then to include a cool down at the end. So this, recommend up to 2 times per week, and depending on your tolerance, 15 to 45 minutes per session. And then ergometry, we'll talk a little bit more about that too. So like I mentioned, it can be assisted cycling, or you can cycle without assistance. You can do it for your upper and lower body. And then there are some bikes even that you can do in different clinics that have functional electric stimulation, where they put little pads on your muscles and give them some stimulation so that the muscles contract as you pedal around. And then for this, it's recommended to do it 3 to 4 times per week. It can be a little bit tricky though, because it's tiring. It's a time commitment if you have to go in somewhere and do it. Sometimes it's hard if you have significant contractures, but for the most part, we can work around it. And then insurance coverage, we have to check with your insurance to see if they'll cover working on it. A lot of times they consider it a maintenance program, but usually we can get it covered for a few months so you can try it and see how it goes. And then there are other maintenance program options. Like I think Courage Kenny has a bike that you can go bike on your own, where somebody's just around that helps supervise you. And then there's a height minimum, although I know they've had up down to 19-month-olds on it. So again, we kind of just build up the pedals and make it work for you and what's best for your body. So those are kind of everything about exercise in general. But like I mentioned, all neuromuscular diseases are different. So I wanted to talk about a couple special considerations for each of the different types of neuromuscular disease. So you can see this little model here. If we start with the muscle, the red muscle, that guy's bicep, the different diagnoses that fall under there are all muscular dystrophies because they affect the muscle. So there's different motor units. The muscle is the first one. And then between the muscle and the nerve is that green line. Between the muscle and nerve is a neuromuscular junction, and that's affected for myasthenia gravis. And then if we move up the chain, the green nerve, that's the peripheral nerve, can be affected for motor and sensory neuropathies like Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease. And if we go a little further up towards the spinal cord, where that attaches, there's cells that can be affected that cause spinal muscular atrophy. So depending on which motor unit is affected, we have different recommendations. So In the one where the muscle is affected, any type of muscular dystrophy, the muscle fibers can be damaged by strenuous exercise. So those eccentric contractions I mentioned are particularly damaging, and sometimes the damage sustained can't be reversed. So that's why, like when boys are little, I do recommend no jumping on the trampoline. If they have like Duchenne is one that I see quite a bit. So if boys have Duchenne, I recommend no jumping on the trampoline because that's really strenuous on their thigh muscles. Strenuous exercise can also trigger an acute heart or lung problem, so it's very important to talk to a cardiologist before starting an exercise program if you have any type of muscular dystrophy. And then we'll kind of move up the chain to the neuromuscular junction or myasthenia gravis. Um, for this, exercise should be completed when the disease is under control and you're not in a period of acute exacerbation. Um, and then this one's particularly important if they have exhaustion or you have lasting joint or muscle pain or shortness of breath. During or after the exercise means it's too strenuous. And then we talk about a dollar per day rule. So basically, if you have 100 cents to make your dollar for the day, and that equates to your energy, and you get to spend all of that each day, you don't want to spend 75 cents of your dollar's worth of energy in the morning exercising, because then you only have 25 cents left to spend for the rest of the day. So you just have to be careful how you spend it and think about the rest of your day and what you want to get out of it. And then exercise at your best time of day. Typically, people with myasthenia gravis have the most energy in the beginning of the day. But again, maybe you don't want to spend it and maybe you want to wait till the end of the day and see how much energy you have left to expend on exercise. And then one of the more important things, and that's unique to myasthenia gravis, is to stay cool. What I mean by that is that the muscles, when they get overheated, don't work as well for these individuals. So it's important that you stay cool, maybe with a cool shower or bath after exercising, or to make sure there's a fan on you, or to not exercise in hot environments. They even make suits that are cool that you can use while you exercise to keep your body at the right temperature. And then it's important to avoid a few activities when you have myasthenia gravis, particularly aquatic therapy or swimming in a warm pool, because your muscles get overheated and then don't work well. And then treadmill training. Treadmill training is not as good because it's not a self-paced activity. And for myasthenia gravis, you really want to be aware of how your body's doing and not let something else pace you. And then we'll move up the chain a little bit more to that green nerve, the peripheral nerve. When that's affected, exercise is really good for the heart and lungs, but it won't overcome muscle wasting. So you will experience a progressive loss of strength regardless of the exercise that you do. But it's still important to do it because your heart and lungs still need to be exercised. And this is where the balance training is really important, or different low impact exercises like swimming, biking, yoga. That's all better than the high impact exercises because your muscles might not be able to stabilize your joints as well. So the low impact is better. And then we'll talk about the last one is spinal muscular atrophy. So we worked all the way up that chain of the motor units. So strengthening for this is not harmful to the muscles because it affects the neurons. The muscles are completely capable, they just aren't receiving the right signal. So strengthening doesn't harm the muscles, but those remaining nerve cells can be overburdened if you do strenuous exercise. So you just want to make sure that you're exercising at the right level for you. The best for this disease is to do high repetitions and low resistance of whatever you end up doing, because it's going to help retrain your nerves and muscles to communicate properly and support you well while you're exercising. So the biggest thing I just want to emphasize is that not all exercise is for everybody. That's why we have an exercise prescription. because it's important to tailor it exactly to you. So maybe being outside and playing with your family is the most important, or maybe trying different adaptive sports is important. Um, so then I think you have to go back to Caitlin's talk too and think about what really interests you and what do you want to spend your time and in activity doing. But still keep in mind that exercise is beneficial, and think about what different types of exercise you want to include in your life. All right, so that's it for me. Are there any questions I can answer at the time? And if you don't have any at the moment, you can always reach out and email me with any questions in the future. I'm happy to help.
Thank you, Molly. Thank you very much. I was just curious, is there anything that you can do exercise-wise to help with balance?
Yes, there's a lot of different things you can do depending on if you are able to stand or not. The more you challenge your balance systems, the more you can retrain them to respond more quickly. So
Okay.
usually you have to do something a little harder than you're used to. So if you're used to always sitting on a firm surface to keep your sitting balance, to retrain it to be even better, you sit on something unstable,
Okay.
and have somebody nearby you. And if you're kind of correcting yourself, your brain is reorganizing to figure out how to best respond when you get, say, you get knocked over or like
Mhm.
bumped into it. It helps you figure out how to respond to future situations. So you can definitely retrain your balance systems to respond more quickly.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you, Molly, very much for your time. We did get something that, okay, just a comment. Um, okay, I see it. There is no question. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Molly. We've got your email, so I urge people to email you too, if they have a little bit more of a personal type of exercise question or, disease related question as well as far as exercise. So thanks for your time this Saturday.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me.
Mhm.